Under the dim Kyiv morning, as sirens faded and smoke lingered above shattered neighborhoods, President Volodymyr Zelensky appeared before the press, his voice carrying both exhaustion and defiance. Ukraine had just survived another massive overnight Russian assault. A child was dead. 9 regions plunged into darkness, and yet the president spoke not of surrender but of endurance. His tone was weary but sharp. Weather conditions reduced our interception rate by about 20 to 30%, I believe. I think that's what caused this effect. But nevertheless, if we can restore, almost fully restore, the water supply during the day, and I think there will be progress toward a more positive situation with electricity, then yes, it's a strong blow, but definitely not a fatal one.
Будуть процеси щодо більш позитивного рішення по електриці, то це удар сильний, да, але він точно не смертельний.
The kind forged in a nation that has learned to breathe under bombardment. Zelensky began by addressing the technical side of the night's attack. The weather, he explained, had reduced Ukraine's interception rate by as much as 30%. Weather conditions reduced our interception rate by about 20 to 30%, I believe, he said, pausing briefly before adding, that's what caused this effect. But there was no self-pity, only determination. If we can restore, almost fully restore, on the water supply during the day, he continued, and there will be progress with electricity too, then yes, it's a strong blow, but definitely not a fatal one. His phrasing, not fatal, seemed deliberate, aimed at both the Ukrainian public and the international audience. It was a reminder that despite the damage, Ukraine remains alive, alert, and resistant. In Kyiv, the resilience has become almost mechanical. Crews move between craters as residents sweep glass from balconies, waiting for the next alarm to sound. For months, Zelensky has warned that the coming winter could become a weapon in itself, one of freezing temperatures, collapsing grids, and missile barrages designed to break morale. Now he was once again pressing Western partners for the single thing that could keep Ukraine breathing through the cold: air defense. We need Patriot air defense systems, he declared. We expect to receive 2 systems in the fall. Of course, this is not the 10 air defense systems we are expecting from the United States. Behind his tone lay frustration, a diplomatic fatigue that's been building for months. Washington and Berlin continue to deliberate, while Kyiv faces the nightly cost of delay. Every missed intercept means another destroyed transformer, another family buried under rubble. Zelensky's language, stripped of diplomatic caution, was designed to remind the West that support delayed is defense denied. When he shifted to comparisons, his voice hardened. Look at what's happening. Even Hamas, he said, invoking a startling parallel. Everyone is ready at some point to stop the fighting, except the Kremlin and Putin. We see that. That is why they must be stopped by force. It was a calculated remark, controversial but pointed. In likening Russia's relentlessness to an extremism beyond reason, Zelensky was underscoring a simple message. Moscow doesn't negotiate in good faith. While wars elsewhere may pause for truce or humanitarian corridors, the Kremlin's campaign, he implied, thrives on perpetual violence. Behind him, aides exchanged brief glances as reporters took note. The comment would soon reverberate across headlines from Warsaw to Washington. Even Hamas stops fighting, but not the Kremlin. It was more than rhetoric. It was a plea wrapped in provocation, aimed squarely at Western capitals still debating the pace of their military aid. We need Patriot air defense systems, as I've already told you. I've already mentioned this, so there's no secret here. We expect to receive 2 systems in the fall, as I said, and we will get these 2 systems along with the appropriate set of missiles. Of course, this is not the 10 air defense systems we are expecting from the United States.
Десятка систем ППО, які ми очікуємо від Сполучених Штатів Америки.
For Ukraine, the message is existential. The lack of adequate air defenses means every Russian strike risks plunging millions into cold and darkness. Power plants that survived one attack may not survive the next. Hospitals rely on backup generators while frontline brigades improvise with dwindling ammunition stocks. Zelensky's team knows that sympathy has limits. Global attention is stretched. The Middle East, Taiwan, and domestic politics in Europe and America compete for headlines. But he also knows that narrative power remains Ukraine's greatest weapon. Each press briefing, each emotional appeal is another attempt to pierce through fatigue and restore urgency. Later in the briefing, the Ukrainian leader shifted to his appeal for coordinated defence procurement under what Kyiv calls the PURL, the Prioritised Ukraine Requirements List. Speaking in English, his tone softened, but the message remained direct. With all respect to Kyiv and to the people of the UK, you helped us a lot, he said, referring to British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. But now we need strong partners to join PURL. Otherwise, other leaders will not join or will do it slowly. He paused briefly, almost as if weighing the diplomatic cost of candour, before adding, of course, Keir is a good signal. The UK is a good signal if Keir will decide to join PURL. For us, it's air defence. The mention of Starmer was deliberate. The UK's new government under Labour has maintained a supportive stance, but questions remain about whether London will match Washington's scale of military assistance. Zelensky's appeal was part gratitude, part nudge, a reminder that symbolic support is not enough when missiles fall nightly. As he spoke, the images from across Ukraine painted the backdrop. Emergency workers combing through ruins in Kharkiv, women filling buckets from water trucks in Dnipro, and families charging phones in subway stations. The humanitarian toll of each attack echoes beyond casualties. It chips away at the rhythm of life itself. In recent weeks, Kyiv's intelligence reports have warned that Russia is ramping up production of cruise and ballistic missiles, replenishing stockpiles for winter assaults. Moscow's strategy is not new: paralyze infrastructure, freeze morale, and force concessions through exhaustion. But Zelensky's counter-strategy rests on endurance and international solidarity, the belief that Ukraine can outlast the Kremlin's brutality if the world stays engaged. His analogy to Hamas, while controversial, was a stark reflection of his frustration with global double standards. In his view, Russia enjoys the luxury of endless escalation without facing the same diplomatic isolation imposed on others. They must be stopped by force, he repeated. Not because Ukraine seeks vengeance, but because, as he said before, negotiations mean nothing if one side only uses them to reload. Each word of his statement was meant to travel through headlines, through parliaments, through every capital where hesitation lingers. Zelensky knows that Western resolve is not infinite. Elections approach in Europe and America. Budgets tighten. And yet, for Ukraine, retreat is not an option. Look at what's happening, even Hamas. You see, everyone is ready at some point to stop the fighting except the Kremlin and Putin. We see that. That is why they must be stopped by force.
Окрім, відповідно, Кремля, і окрім, відповідно, Путіна. Ми це бачимо. І тому тут потрібно зупиняти силою.
Throughout his presidency, Zelensky has mastered the art of emotional communication, not through lofty rhetoric, but through human language shaped by immediacy and loss. He often speaks of children, like the one killed in the latest strike, as symbols of the nation's stolen future. By framing each attack not as numbers, but as personal tragedies, he ensures the war remains visible to those who might otherwise move on. Outside the press hall, Kyiv's skyline still bore the scars of the night before. Apartment windows gaped open, twisted rebar jutted from blackened walls. Yet, amid the devastation, daily life continued, trams running, schools reopening underground, volunteers delivering food to shelters. The president's resilience mirrors that of his people, a refusal to normalize the violence, yet a determination to function within it. His briefings, often somber, are less about delivering news and more about reinforcing a psychological front, keeping morale intact when fatigue threatens to erode it. Internationally, the quote comparing Russia to Hamas sparked debate. Some diplomats privately described it as provocative, fearing it might complicate Ukraine's efforts to maintain support in the Middle East. But to others, it was a shrewd move, a way to shock the global conscience, to remind audiences that Russia's aggression operates outside any moral or humanitarian limit. For Zelensky, the risk was worth it. His leadership has often relied on urgency, speaking truths before they are politically comfortable. Each stark analogy is designed not for comfort, but for clarity. In Western capitals, reactions were swift. The Pentagon reaffirmed its commitment to providing additional Patriot batteries, while European leaders acknowledged Ukraine's plea. Yet logistical delays persist. Production bottlenecks, budgetary debates, and competing security priorities slow the process. For Kyiv, every delay translates to lives lost. As night fell once again over Ukraine, air raid sirens began their familiar wail. The cycle continues: destruction, repair, appeal, and endurance. And in that cycle, Zelensky's words from the morning linger. Even Hamas stops fighting, but not the Kremlin. It is not just a statement about the war. It's a diagnosis of its nature. For the Ukrainian president, the Kremlin's aggression is not about territory alone. It's about erasure of sovereignty, of democracy, of identity. That is why, in his view, it cannot be reasoned with, only resisted.
With all respect to Keir and to people of UK, so you helped us a lot, but now we need strong partners to join Pearl. Otherwise, other leaders will not join or will do it slowly. And of course, Keir is a good signal. UK is a good signal if Keir will decide to join to Pearl. For us, it's air defense.
And so Kyiv prepares for another night, another test of its resolve. Engineers patch power lines under shell fire. Soldiers brace for renewed offensives in the east. And in the capital, the president drafts another message to the world, a message that Ukraine still stands, still fights, and still demands that the world not look away. For now, the child killed in the latest strike becomes another name on a growing list, but also another reason for Zelensky to speak louder. It's a strong blow, he said, but definitely not a fatal one. Those words, spoken with quiet defiance, encapsulate not just Ukraine's struggle, but its faith. Faith that even in darkness, survival itself is a form of victory. That is the spirit Kyiv carries into yet another winter, wounded, defiant and unyielding, determined to prove that while even Hamas may pause, the Kremlin must be forced to stop.
Вас не чути, Сергій, до речі.